Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As you're starting to slowly come in. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to begin. So good afternoon. I'm Nicola Giles. I'm an NFER Schools Partnership Manager, and I'm here that supports schools and maths right across the country and Europe and the world even. And I was previously a senior leader in schools, and I've been teaching for 24 years. But today it's not just my voice. We're also going to be supported by two of my colleagues, Megan and Lauren, who, if you would like to put any questions in the chat, they will try and answer those for you. If not, we'll be able to put those in a follow-up email tomorrow. I'm also joined by Kieran. Now, Kieran is one of our research and assessment experts, and he'll introduce himself in just a moment. So I just want to go over what we're going to be doing. It's slightly different to any of our other webinars that you might have joined before, and welcome if you're new to NFER. So the first one, we'll be looking at a Q&A session with Kieran, looking at particularly diagnostic assessments. That's our big focus today, and particularly with a focus on reading. Then I'll be looking at reading the NFER spring term assessments and those diagnostic commentaries that will be able to support. I'm going to be focused on certain year groups to look at. And then I'm going to give you a walkthrough of the online tool with that focus on reading and how you might use the diagnostic commentaries alongside the tool. So our Q&A session, brand new to NFER. And so, Kieran, would you like to introduce yourself this afternoon?
Yeah, I can do. Hi, my name's Kieran Aurora. I'm a former teacher and now work in NFER as a research manager, working in the Centre of Assessment, and have worked on some of the NFER tests that you may or may not have seen.
Okay, wonderful. So what we thought would be is based on questions that we get from lots of schools, whether it's in any of our feedback, and we thought we'd do that. But if you do have any others, like I said, please put them in the chat and they'll be answered up tomorrow in that follow-up. So that first question then, so Kieran, what is diagnostic assessment?
So when we think about diagnostic, when we think about any sort of assessment, it generally falls into three different categories. So you have summative assessment, formative assessment, and diagnostic. So each of them serve their own purpose. Summative and formative are probably the ones we've heard the most about. Summative being ones that you'll typically see at like the end of a year or like end of year exams, or at the end of a particular stage of a learner's life or journey, such as the Year 6 national curriculum tests like SATs, or when they go into Year 11 and start doing their GCSEs. So these assessments are usually quite formal, often high stakes, and there's usually a grade or judgment given at the end. And then we can move on to formative assessments, which on the other hand are more of a way of just checking in to see how students have been doing or are doing on a particular topic or subject. Things like homework, in-class assessments, quizzes, plenaries are generally forms of formative assessment. They're pretty ongoing and informal, and they're aimed at identifying learners' strengths or weaknesses to tailor and can help tailor teaching accordingly. Whereas diagnostic assessment that we're talking about today is quite similar to formative assessment. So it can be used to check students' knowledge and skills, generally at the start of a new topic, because topics generally build on concepts learned previously, especially true in subjects like reading. So it can help in planning the teaching content by understanding what students already know and what students already can do. Although I said it can be used at the beginning of specific topics, diagnostic assessments can also be good at any stage of identifying specific learning needs or challenges, or just celebrating student success as well.
Brilliant. So what are the main advantages of us using it?
So there's plenty of advantages to using diagnostic assessment. Like I said, each of the assessments have their own place, but specifically about diagnostics, the things that I've got listed or we'll talk about, I'm probably going to miss a few out, but the ones that really spring to my mind are that it can help pinpoint where students or where pupils are in their own specific learning journey. So highlighting their strengths, weaknesses, and crucially, if the assessment has been designed well enough, can help highlight any misconceptions that learners may have had throughout their journey. This can help lead actually to teachers tailoring their lessons and plans to help learners maximize the benefit of the lessons in the hope that lessons are more rewarding for both teachers and their learners. It's also really good for tracking progress. So diagnostic assessments shouldn't really be seen as just a one-off, more of an ongoing process. With these like deep check-ins, we can see how students are doing and how they're getting on throughout the school year. And I think one thing that's very important to me when I was using diagnostic assessments is the potential it has in boosting confidence and motivation in learners. So when students can see their improvement in topics and specific subject areas, it should hopefully inspire them to continue to work hard and be focused. It's also nice for teachers to see their hard work paying off inside and outside the classroom.
Definitely. So what makes a good diagnostic assessment then?
So I think a good diagnostic assessment can cover a broad range of skills and knowledge areas. So you should be able to dive deep to give a full picture of a student's understanding of a subject or topic. Like I talked about beforehand, it should give opportunities for students to showcase any misconceptions they may have, meaning the questions need to be appropriately written and of the right level of difficulty. So not too easy, not too hard, the same as any assessment really. What we want is ideally something that's potentially easy to turn around quite quickly, that also has the opportunities to address misconceptions. I think timely feedback is quite important for both students and for teachers. So students can see exactly how they were doing at that particular time of taking said assessment, and teachers can tailor any teaching plans that they have to address any learning gaps quickly.
Okay, so what should I look for, or what should we look for in diagnostic assessment outcomes?
So sometimes the reason that a pupil's having a difficulty is quite clear, but it's not always the case. So it can be quite helpful, therefore, if diagnostic assessments provide an indication of the misunderstandings or misconceptions that lie behind an error that a pupil may be making. I think, like I said, it makes it easier to plan material which will consider and correct pupils' thinking. I realize I've said that quite a lot so far, but that's essentially what's happening. If you're using an assessment that has been trialed with students at like the same stage of their learning journey, like our NFER tests, the diagnostic assessment can give feedback. It can give teachers the ability to see their students' performance in a broader context beyond the classroom or school. So looking at the national standard. So for example, if you have that sort of test available to you, if a teacher sees that all students in a class from a school show a similar knowledge and abilities in one particular subject, without measuring it to a national benchmark, it's hard to see how their level compares to students of the same age throughout the country.
Mhm. Okay, so why is the spring term a good time to actually use diagnostic assessments?
So I think all terms are really good for using diagnostic assessments, but spring term is great because obviously it's a midway point of the year. I think enough time has passed that pupils are now used to a potentially new teacher and new surroundings if they're joining a new school. The dip that we tend to see at the beginning of the autumn term after the long summer holidays would have been long gone by now. So I think learners are in a better place to really show or showcase what they know and what they don't know. And it's easy to see where there are gaps in student knowledge and pupil knowledge. It can also give learners an idea of how they're doing. It'll also give a chance for teachers to know how they're doing and how they need to tailor their lessons effectively going forward from that point on. And as I mentioned beforehand, it can provide a sense of confidence to both teachers and students to know exactly how they're doing. So they know that whether they're doing really well, let's say they're doing really well, then they know that what they're doing is really well and can continue on that way. But also if there are specific gaps and we understand the reasons as to why there are those gaps, it can really give like a really heavy focus, and they know that these are the particular areas or these are the reasons that what I need to do to improve, essentially. And also it's an essential, it's a pretty useful tool before, let's say in year 6, before a summative assessment at the end of the school year, or actually the end of any year of things to come.
Okay, fabulous. Now, thank you very much. That's given us a real insight into that diagnostic assessment and how teachers and hopefully pupils can actually use that going on for the rest of the year. So thank you very much, Kieran. If there's any other questions in the chat, then perhaps I might be coming to you then tomorrow, Kieran, to help us out with some of those answers. But thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Nicola. See you later.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Okay, so just to really give sort of like that extra information. So informed teaching and learning with NFER tests. Now, you might have got those autumn term tests already under the way. I've just realised that picture, it's the children looking very miserable, isn't it? Rather than looking all smiley with their tests. So it's going to give you really that baseline to where you can start to monitor that attainment and that progress. And as we said, the spring term tests start to monitor that progress even more and start to really inform that teaching and learning with that diagnostic guidance. And then we move on to then the summer term test, which feel like a long way away at the moment, to start to summarise really that summative assessment about progress and attainment, ready for them to move on to the next year or the next phase in their education. So I'm going to go through looking at different types of the different tests that we have in our suite. So with our year one reading assessments, you can see here, these are just examples of them. They're presented in 2 different papers. And as I was actually talking to some colleagues today, so with the year one, it's very much scripted from the teacher's point of view. It really supports teachers in how they're going to present that assessment for their pupils. Now that may be done, like it says here, the paper 1 is intended for all pupils, but ideally paper 2 may be intended for most of the pupils that are working where you believe are working at or above that expected level for year 1 at this point in the year from that spring term. And that really the teacher guide really guides that teacher and the script to be able to support those pupils in taking away that sort of cognitive overload, and that they can really check in with their students to see if they actually understand what's being read to them. Where the year 2 reading assessments, and I've just got some timings there. Now these are approximate timings, and these are all key to really have a look at your teacher guides. So the year 2 reading assessment material is presented in 2 papers. And then you've got with the second paper, you can see there on the right-hand side, the actual booklet that the children will read. And again, both these papers are intended for all pupils. However, you might find it's unsuitable for some of your pupils to take the paper 2. So please do not administer paper 2 to any pupils that you don't think is suitable, but that is something for you to discuss in your year groups or across your school. So in Key Stage 2, from years 3 to 5, you can then see that there is it's based very much in line with the end of Key Stage National Curriculum Tests. And you can see again the timings there, these are all in the teacher guides. And where it says, for example, on the year 4 one here about a break, now that can be a break, an actual break that children might be having in the morning, or the break can be a day and you choose to do the second part on a second day. And it always consists of a booklet for the children to answer in, something that they will read. And obviously I've got an example of the teacher guide there at the bottom. And in that teacher guide, there is also going to be about that marking scheme for you to be able to support you. So in there, you will also see all the links to the national curriculum and these domains, which is really going to be key with what I'm looking at later. So then you can see those all down. This is the Key Stage 2 reading one. So what does the NFER diagnostic commentary tell you? So in all our spring term assessments, there's a diagnostic commentary summary in there. So it really is pupils' responses to questions were scrutinised in order to identify common, correct and incorrect answers. So this is, remember that standardised sample of those 60,000 pupils. The diagnostic commentaries have been provided for test questions for each pupils in the sample. So looking at similar errors that in the sample versus the errors that your pupils might be making as well, and having that comparison. So you can see there on certain questions within the diagnostic commentary, you can see the percentage of how many got it correct, that overview of the performance. So it's a bit like a narrative in there, and I will be giving examples. And then there is particular aspects of performance and misconceptions about things that you may do, like Kieran was saying earlier, going forward for the next half term or term. So this is what the diagnostic commentary looks like and how it's set out in the teacher guide stroke mark schemes in there. You'll see right at the top, there's the programme of study, and this is from a year 1 spring. Then it's actually got the marking in there. Then it's got, like we said, the percentage of pupils who answer the question correctly. On this example, it's 62%. Then it's got an identification of common errors that may have been made. Now, obviously, if that 62% was less than that, then the common errors may be quite different. Then there's a percentage of pupils making that same error. So then you can go, oh, actually, that's similar to my children or my pupils. Then there's that further discussion of that error and about implications for teaching and that misconception in there. So what I've got here is I've got 3 different examples. So this is taken from the Year 1 Spring. And I've got that on there and I've just taken sort of some extracts really in there. So this was 64%. And this is when they were asking, so the number of pupils mistakenly indicated that Mervin's granddad, and this is about Mervin the owl, and so 64% got this correct in the standardized sample. But many children, this is 18%, actually selected granddad rather than Mr. Owl. And this is really where they may have sort of an understanding that older people might be within their family the ones that wear glasses. So it might be the granddad in their family rather than actually Mr. Owl or dad. So whoever there is a level of challenge in this question, since the text does not explicitly state that it was Mr. Owl, it's actually when Mrs. Owl says your father. So it really is having a look at sort of understanding the characters within a story and the relationship then with each other. And it's really making sure you can explore that. So that is something, again, within your practice, within your teaching, that you can then have a look at for your pupils if they've come across this very similarly in Year 1, about what you might, your implications for the summer term. So here is one from a Year 3 Spring. So this is again to be retrieval and recording information. So this is about a campfire and what the children need to be able to sort of cook on. So 58%, slightly less than the last one. So 58% got it correct, but 20% of pupils gave answers from their knowledge about food, which could be cooked on a campfire. So for example, some children put meatballs or sausages rather than actually those which should be marshmallows, chicken or burgers. So it may be, and this is where NFER will suggest, it may be beneficial for pupils to practice providing sufficient answers that are based on the text. Now, this might be something you will realise, that actually children start to go from their own life experiences rather than actually what they've read. So the more exposure they have to that, the much more confident your pupils are going to be able to retrieving that information from fiction and non-fiction. And then the last one is from a Year 5, from the Year 5 Spring, again, retrieval and recording. So this is where actually a lot less children answer this correctly, so 40%. And on this, you can see that the number of people struggled to identify actually 2 separate acceptable points. And this is where 7% of them repeated the same point twice. So they knew they had to write 2 things, but actually they just repeated themselves. So they didn't have that second one to go with. So here it suggests that pupils may benefit from practice at reviewing answers to see if they can demonstrate separate ideas, or if one answer is simply an extension or a repetition, for them to realise, and that could be something they could do in their peers as well. So the more exposure they have to doing that, the much stronger they're going to be. So this is all in those teacher guides for the spring term. So using that online analysis tool, so this is where you've got your teacher guides now and you've got that information in there. So you're going to record all of your tests in one area. It can instantly convert that raw score to a standardised and an age standardised score. And then you can compare your year groups or your class data. You can identify those gaps, something that Kira mentioned earlier. And you can start to produce instant reports to really sort of scrutinise to get that sort of level of trends or patterns within your school or within classes. And then you can create some custom reports as well. So using the outcomes, so within those teacher guides as well, you've got your standardised scores. So where it's that standardised sample that got 50% or 64%, for example, you've also got then this. So this is then where it shows you that average standardised score is set around that 100, but you can see that the average band right across the middle from 85 all the way to 115. And this is where it's comparing the standardised group with then your pupils and the pupils that you put into the tool. So within the tool, there are 4 reports. There is also a section called View Results, and I will look at that. So there is individual progress, and this is where this will show pupils a standardised score and an age-related expectation, and you'll be able to see the journey of a pupil over time. So again, talking about that progress and how there might be dips. Children don't necessarily learn like that or even learn like this. The second report is called Attainment Comparison, and this is like a scatter graph. So this is where you can see that expected progress and then have a look particularly within reading and look at 2 different points in time for your children to see if there's a difference and where some children might be sort of missed within the classroom. And you can have that direct comparison from that raw score to the standardised on the attainment comparison. Then the last 2 reports, so you've got question level analysis and programme of study, and these can be almost seen right alongside each other, and they can be looked at in both, whichever order you want to have a look at. So the question level analysis, though, this allows you to really have a breakdown of each individual question, all your pupils, whether that be a class, a group of pupils, or a whole year group, and this could be 90 children, and actually which questions they've achieved well on and which ones they might need extra sort of practice on going forward over the year. Programme of study really allows you to look at that whole class or that whole year group about an area of the curriculum. So whether that's going to be particularly on learning gaps about what you've taught already, if you've had a particular focus, can that be evident in the data that you're then looking at? So I'm then going to, sorry, can I just check? Lauren, can you see the NFER screen now?
Yep, you're fine.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
No worries.
So once you've logged in, I bet it's going to have logged me out now if I go back in. Let me see. It's going to, right. When you are logging in, just make sure you always have the school ID number as well as your username and password. Now, I'm not going to necessarily look at administration, but I do have other webinars coming up if you want to look at more information about entering that data, etc. More about looking at the data tonight, particularly with that focus on reading. So we are going to assume you've entered your data. Now, this might be something that, depending on whether you are a teacher or a senior leader or someone working within a central team within a MAT. Now, this might be something where you're thinking about, are you going to be entering data for all your pupils, as in the question level analysis, that ones, the zeros and the X's, which I will talk about, and then, or whether you're just going to enter that standardized score. So really, to get that idea of using that diagnostic commentary, particularly for our spring term assessments, but they are also in our grammar and our spelling for all year, and they are also in all our year 6 assessments as well. The diagnostic is there. So you really need to think about, are you going to enter it for all your pupils, or are you going to enter it possibly for a group or a focus group for your school? So I'm going to actually have a real sort of look at year 2. So I'm going to go, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 reports, but there is also view results. So I'm going to go to view results first. So I'm going to select reading, year 2, and then I'm going to select spring, the term we're in, and then all. So you'll be able to see, so although you've got the conversion tables within the teacher guides and the mark schemes, but you can also put in, once you've marked the paper, put in the raw score, it converts it to a standardised and an age standardised score. There's something that came up in a previous webinar. So an age standardised score may be something you might want to discuss within your teachers, about your pupils. And this is the difference where it's comparing like for like. So if a child was 6 years 3 months, they would be compared to 6 years 3 months within the standardised group. So much tighter, but then you've also got to then look at, by the time children get to year 6, that age standardised score may not be as relevant as, you know, within SATs, that isn't necessarily looked at. So that is something as definitely for a conversation point to have with teachers, to then look at, as you can see here, the difference between, there is a slight difference between the standardised and the age standardised. You can export any of this information, and then you can then have a look on there. And then obviously you can look at these at any point. So again, the more information you put in, so for example, if I put in all year groups and all you will then be able to see their year 1 and their year 2 reading as well. So again, you can see that journey of your individual pupils across a class as well, or a year group. Okay, sticking with year 2, I'm going to go to the reports. When you can see it whirring. So the first one is that individual progress. Now we're looking at particularly reading. You can see here, because we're looking at year 2, you're then that they've had that information in there, and actually you can start to see that journey. The coloured ones are age-related expectation with our summer term assessments. And then you can see here, if you hover over, this is their standardised score. So you can see then that journey of the pupil, and you can just drop down wherever you might then be using that. These can be printed and then can be used for different aspects within the school and support for your teachers. Then the attainment comparison. So this is where I'm going to pick reading. I'm going to pick year 1 summer, year 2 autumn. So these are my year 2 pupils. I want to then have a look at 2 different points for the same pupils. So if I click on show, and again, if you're a large school with a lot, you may want to filter, and you can filter for classes, gender, birth term, free school meals, ethnicity, and send. These are on filters. And then you can see this expected progress across, and so I'm hovering around. And then you can see the ones that are furthest away from that line really is where there is going to be a difference between those 2 points. And ideally, if they're going to be nearer, they're going to be making that expected progress. Now, if the children are going to be having like for like, so if they're going to be 100 each time they're making that expected progress, obviously if they're gaining on their standardised score, they're making more than expected progress. But you can also then have a look at reading. I'm going to pick, we're still in year 2, but I'm now going to have 2 different points within the year between autumn and then spring. I'm realising I'm using loads of my hands tonight. And again, you can hover over here to then see, and obviously on this one, they're much closer to that line than they were when it was the year 1 and the year 2 mix on there. If you are looking, obviously, I know we've got a focus on reading, you can also look between reading and maths as well. So I'm going to still stick with year 2, and I've got question level analysis. These are the last 2 that I said can be used in a different order depending on your focus. So reading, year 2, spring. So as I said earlier, there are 2 papers. Now, if your pupils, just in case you're thinking, if they don't do paper 2, now on here, both all my pupils have done paper 1 and paper 2, but if they hadn't done paper 2, there is still a standardised score that can be got. You don't have to do both, so don't feel under pressure for some of your pupils who are not ready really to do that. I'm just going to make that slightly smaller on there. So then you can see here, you've got your average of your pupils, the average of the standardised group. Now, as you can see here, my raw score is slightly higher than actually the standardised raw score. Then there's that difference between, and you can see the links to the programmes of study here all the way across. And these are for obviously Key Stage 1. You can then see where you may have decided to add those 1s, 0s and X's. If you've only put a raw score in, you won't be able to get this information here. So it may be about thinking about selecting a group to be able to enter that data, if not entering everybody. So if you go along here, you can then see there are some that are in green, some that are not coloured and some that are red. Quite intuitive. Green is obviously what's working well. Your children are doing better than the standardised group, particularly with that type of question and that area of the curriculum. Red is the fact that they are not doing as well as the standardised group. And if there is no colour, it's sort of marginal between the 2, or there's less differential between. Then you can start to have a look at the different types of questions, and again using that diagnostic commentary to go back, and this is really where teams of teachers can work together looking at the teacher guide, the types of questions that were an error development for your pupils. And then if I go to the last one, I'll keep going back between these 2, you'll see. So with programme of study, so reading, year 2, spring, and this will be the same for other year groups. I've just picked 1 year group at the moment and then go to show. So these are the 2 different papers, and you can click on all as well. And then you can see the areas of the national curriculum for reading for year 2. You can see the available marks for those children, and then you can start to have a look to see how well your pupils are doing versus, now it might be yours does not look like this, your pupil selection. Now again, remember I said you can filter at any point. So you may then want to filter by gender. If you filter by gender and apply, you'll then be able to see males and then females. Now it happens to be that I've got 5, half and half, 50% of each. So then you might be able to see that there is a difference between the genders within your year 2s. And that might be something then to look at. And then it might be here that you might want to take a look at more about making inferences, which we know obviously children might find a little bit difficult. But there may be there's quite a difference here, although there's only 3 marks available. But it might be then looking particularly at 1B. So it's looking at lots of different information. It's looking at areas of the curriculum, which might then give you that information for your next summer term from the spring term, or from the spring term from the autumn. It's also then going back to the previous report as well. Remember. Oh, sorry. And then having a look. And one thing, remember, like I said with the other one, you can export this. So I'm going to, where are we? I can't remember if it's the year 2. I'm going to. Can you see this, Lauren, the Excel?
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. So once I've exported that, so this is actually paper 1. So it looks almost identical as it is on the screen. I'm just going to make that slightly bigger for everybody. And then you can see those green, the white ones, and then the red sections. So what I then do is I then look at I look at this, and I'm going to hide those green in there. So I've hidden all the green ones, and I've now had a focus on the ones that we're in line with, or we're actually not doing as well. And then having a look at those particular curriculum domains in there. And then you can see that that's then 1B on the ones that we're in line with, and then particularly, and then in 1A as well. So starting to drill down a little bit deeper, starting to look at patterns and looking at trends and really what it's going to give you. Now, remember when I went through the PowerPoint earlier, it's looking at that diagnostic, particularly really drilling down the type of question, what question it was, and what also the standardized or that diagnostic commentary told you. What did other pupils do, and were your pupils very similar? And what are some of the suggestions that indicate what you might want to put into your future planning going forward in the next half term or term? Can you see the NFER tool, Lauren?
We're still on the spreadsheet.
Okay, it's fine. You can see it now?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and show you then a different year group. And again, do please put the questions in the chat. And if we can't answer those tonight, we'll put those in the follow-up tomorrow, because some of them might be quite individual to individual schools, or there might be much broader questions as well. So now on year 5, I'm going to go again. Remember that view results. I want to look at reading. I'm year 5, spring term all. So again, you're seeing that pattern of A class or A year group of their raw score, standardised and A standardised. Remember, these pupils are now older. They've been in the school much longer, and you may have been using NFER for some time in your school. So if you remember, if you click all, then you'll be able to see then see all of that data of those pupils. So this is tracked from year 4 all the way then through to year 5. And again, you can start to see those patterns of their raw scores, their standardised, and that journey from a sort of numerical point of view. I'm going to jump off the individual one and straight onto this, which remember is the attainment comparison. So reading, again, useful for reading leads or English leads in school 2. So this is year 5. And I'm going to do, it might be the way you go from spring, the term that we're in now, and then it might be once you've got that summer data in there, you would then be looking at that. And then you'd be able to have a look at where those children are sitting much closer to the line, and where it might be that you're indicating about questioning within class about those children that are a little bit further away from that expected progress line, and about the difference between spring and summer. Is it going in the right direction? And again, you can filter. So if I then put males, now obviously if your class is slightly bigger than mine, you would be able to then see more males on there. And again, if I clear it, and I want to particularly put, again, if you've got more than one class, you'd be able to see one class in there as well. So again, I would definitely get in the habit, if you are a more than one form entry, to always select the year group on the dashboard. So then you can actually then filter for the classes in there rather than keep going forward and back as well. Saves a bit of time, particularly if you're looking at analysing that data. So if I then again have a look at that question level analysis on this one, so reading, we're now year 5, remember we'll look at spring. So there's only one paper in Key Stage 2, like I said earlier. And then you've got here, also just to remember, I didn't mention earlier, and I bet there isn't any in here now, you can see near the end of the paper, so from about question 24, you've got some X's appearing. I was actually talking to a school earlier today, actually, and they said years ago they would have put like a dash in there. But an X on the where you're entering data is like a no entry sign. So if the X is where the child has not attempted it at all, so they have literally either skipped that question, or they've skipped it because they don't have a clue and they know they've got to answer all the questions, or they've got to work through the paper, or maybe they're running out of time. So this is where you might clearly see whether on this particular grid, or whether you export it, where those X's might appear. Now, it might be that they appear much later in the paper, where the children may be running out of time, or their stamina has waned a little bit and they've put all their energy at the beginning of the paper. Or like I said, it might be just clearly on one question, which will again give you an indication of maybe what was that type of question, particularly on reading. Was it the type of question, or was it the content? And again, here you can see those areas, the red areas that they're not doing as well as that standardized. And remember, it is a big comparison. So it's not just your pupils compared to your pupils, it's a much bigger sample to compare. And then that last one, so reading, remember, year 5, spring. And again, here you've got then obviously the Key Stage 2 reading curriculum domains in here. And you can see then those marks available, average standardized group, and the average pupil selection is in here. And you can see how that may differ to yours. Now, already I would clearly look at this and go, okay, it's 2F. So a real difference already I can clearly see, and that might be around subject knowledge of teachers as well, but it might be something that 2F, identify and explain about how information and the content's related, might be something you don't do until later in the year, or it might be something your students, you know that's where they are really, really struggling. And again, you can start to then have a look. I always tend to go to gender first because it will have both of those on there. And actually I can clearly see with that same one, it's even more so because the filter is male. So it's actually more my boys than it is across the two. Girls are slightly stronger, but actually overall, they're much weaker there, even with those 6 marks that are available. And again, because that's 2F, then again, you can go back, go here. And again, here you can then have a look at where those 2F, and obviously some of these are going to be the ones in that red section as well. And you can see then there. And it's really, really important, particularly if you're a senior leader in a school, if you're on here today, is really having a look at those teacher guides with your teachers, and that commentary to really about how it can best be supporting you, but how you then can really, really support your children as well. And particularly, like Kieran said earlier, it's also about the celebration, about what the children are doing really well at and how they're much stronger, and that's progress that they're making as they go through and gaining those skills and that knowledge as they go through the year. Okay. Sorry, you keep inside my face, everybody. I do apologise. Okay, so hopefully, I'm just looking at my time because I can't see it on my screen. I'm going to give you a few minutes back. But one of the things I would really appreciate, so if you'd like to ask me a more individual question about your school and your data, I am here to support or help you individually as a teacher or as a senior team. If you want to drop me an email, you can do that, and we can perhaps arrange a remote meeting. If you've got more of a query about something about admin, as in logging on, or tools, you may be new to your school and you don't have access because that access was with a previous member of staff, please email the products at nfer.ac.uk. They'll be able to do that for you. Also, this is a brand new webinar tonight. Hopefully you have found it useful. I really hope that you've got a good takeaway that you can take away and think, oh, I'm really going to use that in my practice or to support my school. We would really appreciate, we've got a survey. Now, I know I changed it from 5 minutes to 2 because I think it's only going to take you 2 minutes. Now, tomorrow, we will be sending out a thank you email with a recording of tonight that you may want to share, but also that will have questions that may have come up in the chat this afternoon. Please, and there'll be a link there to that survey, because obviously we can then make sure we tailor our support for you by what you want, rather than what I think you all want. Well, thank you very much for your time. Do keep dry, and hopefully the wind has not blown all of your fences down like it seems to be right across the country. So please keep safe and have a wonderful rest of your half term. Thank you very much, everyone.